Wednesday, August 16th, 2023, electronic meeting of the Ann Arbor Transportation Commission. This meeting is being held electronically, but we intend to conduct this meeting similarly to an in-person meeting. Public comment will be via telephone or Zoom only. To speak during any of the public comment opportunities, please call 206-337-9723 and enter meeting ID 934-6385-2907 or join via the Zoom link. This information is also available on the published agenda in the public notices section of the city website and on the broadcast meeting on channel 16 of CTN. All right, so with that, could you please call roll?
Not a problem. I'll now call roll. I've received regrets from Commissioner Clayman and Margolis who will not be able to attend. Please say here and where you're dialing from when your name is called. Commissioner Bolden.
Here, Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Ackman.
Here, Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Grover.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Altomaki.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Hook.
Present from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Keeler.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Clayman is absent. Commissioner Lee.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Grosjean.
Here from Swain.
Okay. Commissioner Hess.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Hutchinson.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Margolis is absent. Lieutenant Mike Sherbo. Okay. And with that, we do have quorum.
All right, thank you. There are two items on the consent agenda, approval of the agenda and approval of the minutes. Are there any modifications to the consent agenda? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented? Motion by Peter, seconded by Lou.
No, I was raising my hand to discuss the agenda.
Okay, please.
Last meeting, we had talked about a discussion of major streets traffic calming. And I guess I don't see it. I'm wondering when we can get that added on. I was expecting it to be on this agenda, actually. Is there a...
Yeah, we are working toward, we're calling it the speed management program, but
Okay.
yeah, we are planning on bringing that forward. We just finalized some focus groups last week, I think it was. So we're making some tweaks to the program. And we expect to fold in that discussion with maybe a reconfiguration discussion, because I know that's another topic that's been raised in the past, or road diet discussion. So we thought about kind of packaging that in a conversation at a future meeting. Maybe the next meeting if we have all of our ducks lined up in a row by then.
Okay.
All right, any other comments on the agenda or minutes? All right, motion to approve. Wanwu, seconded by Dharma. So all those in favor of the motion, please say yes or raise your hand.
Yes.
And all opposed, please say no or raise your hand. All right, the consent agenda is approved. Public comment period. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes. Again, please call 206-337-9723 and enter meeting ID number 934-6385-2907 or connect via Zoom as described on the agenda. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number or the person's Zoom ID. In order to electronically raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak, please press *9 on your phone or select the raise hand button in Zoom. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name at the beginning of your comments. All right, so what do we have here? We have, looks like 3 raised hands.
Yes, we do. First one on the list is Clark Charnersky. I'll be giving you 3 minutes and a 30-second head start when your time is up. You are now allowed to talk.
There, I had to unmute, sorry. Good evening, everybody. My name is Clark Charnersky. I'm calling from Ann Arbor. What I'm calling about is something that's been on MLive and other news organizations in the past couple of weeks. It has to do with the proposal by MDOT to fence the railroad line essentially between Barton Dam and Foster Bridge along Barton Dam or Barton Pond. And some of the neighbors have objected to this. A number of them have. But in all this discussion, I haven't seen any reference to the border-to-border trail. And this trail is, of course, goes county to county and one side of the county to the other. You're probably familiar with it. And it is planned in another 2 or 3 years to be built right along this same stretch of roadway between the Huron River Drive roadway and the railroad tracks. And this report from 2016 for Border Trail does call for fencing along that route. This is similar to fencing you'll see along a similar type of arrangement just west of Zeeb Road. And also between Zeeb Road and Delhi Park, there's construction going on for the path, and that also calls for fencing where the path abuts the railroad tracks. The opponents to this fencing say we haven't had any problems there, people haven't been hit, but that ignores the fact that this will be a trail used by hundreds of people a day when it gets built, and protection is needed, especially for children who use the trail. There's also in a news article, a person who is circulating a petition against this has indicated that it's safe to cross the tracks because there's a green light. And when it turns red, it means the train's coming. That is, nothing can be further from the truth. This is to signal the engineer how to drive the train, what the clearance is. A green light means that heading toward the green light, the train is cleared for travel through that territory at maximum train speed, which is right now close to 60 or 70 miles an hour. And it's a very dangerous situation to imply that it's safe when the light is green. The saying among railroads is you expect a train on the tracks anytime from any direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next one on the list is Adam Goodman. You will now be given 3 minutes with a 30-second heads up. You can now speak.
Hi, this is Adam Goodman, also joining from Ann Arbor. So I've been biking around the city a bunch this summer looking for summer game codes for the library, and also checking out a lot of the work that's been happening on our streets. And first of all, I'm really pleased to see the vertical elements finally going in for our quick build projects. Up until last month, I was fond of saying that they were neither quick nor builds. And now only one of those things is true, so that's progress. But I've also been quite disappointed by seeing what seem to be numerous missed opportunities for simple and low-cost improvements in these projects. And because limited time, only 3 minutes to talk, I'll stick to just 2 concepts. This is not an exhaustive list. So the first is lane width. The city has done a few lane narrowing projects in a few places, and we have really good evidence that these are beneficial at reducing speed and improving safety. So why aren't we doing this every single time we restripe a street? Or 2 examples where we didn't. One, there seems to have been a capital maintenance project on Huron Parkway near Glacier Way. And actually, I thought I remembered Mr. Hess saying that there would indeed be lane narrowing there with some painted buffers, but it appears to have been repainted exactly as it was before. And the second is a capital maintenance project on Packard heading south from Stadium. And I haven't gone out there with a tape measure, but the travel lanes there seem to be super wide, and it's definitely been my experience that there are excessive speed issues there. And there's probably enough space to actually buffer the bike lane or even make it separated with delineators. So, when we were restriping, why didn't we do some of that? And then the second concept I want to talk about is advisory bike lane markings through intersections. So again, the city has done this before, It's been done for most or all of the length of 7th Street. And, while I won't say this is a perfect treatment because it does require bikes and cars to share space, it really does help people feel more confident traveling on a corridor and does address the common problem that we have in the city of disappearing bike lanes through intersections. And in my experience, it also tends to make drivers a little bit more respectful of bicyclists' space. But Getty's was recently resurfaced, heading east from Observatory, and right there, it still has disappearing bike lanes. And
30 seconds.
going back to 7th, like this is even true on Liberty as it approaches 7th from one side. And that was the side that was done more recently. So why aren't these things just our policy? Every single time we restripe a road, we reduce the lane width to say no more than 10.5 feet. We make sure that bike lanes are continuous through intersections with at least advisory markings. Really, this is the least we should do. I think we should be doing much more, but we're not even doing this. And I don't understand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is Adam Jakiewicz. You can now speak.
Hi, this is Adam Jaskevich in the 4th Ward, 1430 Las Vegas Drive. There's one thing I wanted to talk about, but first I'm going to just kind of touch on a couple things that have been mentioned already. As far as like the fencing along the train tracks, I think I did see that petition coming around, and yeah, I'm not sure that I support not having any fencing, but I really think that we really need to look at how we're doing crossings over the train tracks and underpasses and things like that, because like the big reason why people trespass on the train tracks is because they're trying to get to the other side of the tracks, right? So if you have situations where you've got fences along one side of the track or fences along both sides of the track, like people are still trying to cross, they're going to find a way to get past the fences and then they're going to have to go along the tracks until they can get through the fences on the other side, right? And that's just more dangerous than just going straight across. So I think we really need to try to figure out a way that we can work with MDOT and get some safe crossings in place. Ideally underpasses or overpasses where people aren't going to be hit by trains, right? Because that's what we're trying to avoid, is people being hit by trains. So I think we need to figure that out, especially when there's like the Expo on the other side of the tracks there, and there's some recreational stuff that people do over there, and people want to get there, right? And I think we got to figure it out. And there's also a similar situation, probably even more people trying to cross over by the Arb, getting across the tracks between the border to border trail and the Arb. So we really need to figure that out, get some safe ways for people to get across the tracks or under the tracks or whatever needs to happen. So I do think we need to think about that. As far as bike lanes, like intersections are the most dangerous part. So we can't just say, hey, it's an intersection and it's difficult, let's give up.
Seconds.
All right. I'll get to the thing I wanted to talk about, which is the traffic calming resolution introduced by Dharma. I think this is really great. And I've been to a few of the public meetings around the Greenview stuff, and some questions around this came up and why we can't have vertical elements. And I think this is a really good resolution to address those concerns, and I would like to see it move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is Alex Lowe. You can now talk.
Hi, this is Alex Lowe, calling in from Southeast Ann Arbor. First of all, I want to say that I agree about the traffic calming resolution. I think that is absolutely fantastic. The main thing I want to talk about is the bylaws change and specifically some suggestions that were made at council to that effect. While I believe that council certainly had their hearts in the right place about it, I think the specific idea of restricting the final seat on the commission to someone 55 or older doesn't quite meet the goal of helping to better represent underrepresented groups. Some alternatives I would suggest are maybe a non-car owner as someone who does it, someone who walks, bikes, or buses as their primary commute, etc. Doubly so if we can recommend a minority who's in these positions. And for what it's worth, all of those would mean that I would not be able to be on the commission. But I think that that those voices are very important to hear, and I think that that the idea of having someone 55 plus is representing an already overrepresented group in city government. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I believe that's all the public commenters.
All right. Thanks for everyone who commented this evening. All right, let's see. I'll note to the commissioners that we also received 2 emails, so be sure to check those in your packet. All right, business section. First up, first of 2 traffic calming proposals. It's exciting. Is Baldwin from Packard to Stadium traffic calming. Petition process for the Baldwin traffic calming between Packard and Stadium is complete and is before the Transportation Commission for a recommendation. So Raymond, if you could please review the project and answer any questions.
Sure thing. Thank you, Brett. So as Brett introduced, we have several different traffic calming items on the agenda tonight. So the first is this traffic calming petition for Baldwin between Packard and Stadium. Let me share my screen so I can show you what the proposed plan is. So it's a relatively small segment of road, but it is a common cut through or shortcut for people trying to avoid the signal at Stadium and Packard. And so this, neighborhood has desired traffic calming, I think, for a while. And so when we received the successful petition, we've gone ahead and queued it up. And there are 2 devices proposed. They are both speed humps. They are both on either side of Cherokee Road by about 100 feet in either direction. And this went through the process as we normally do, several meetings. And 100% of the respondents are supportive of this. So it is showing strong support among the neighborhood. The project cost is identified to be $35,000 for these 2 devices. But one thing you may have noticed in the packet, the resolution actually calls for this to be implemented in fiscal year 2025, because believe it or not, even though we are only 1 month into the fiscal year, we have significant commitments already to the traffic calming program. The first 3 petitions that you approved, Granger, and I think Fulmer, were all programmed for this fiscal year. And so those construction costs have taken a pretty big bite out of the budget. And so we are keeping some of the budget intact so that we can continue to process petitions. And so I just wanted to highlight that pretty much every traffic calming petition you see from this point going forward is probably going to be put in construction year for next fiscal year. And there's a caveat on that. Obviously, the next fiscal year budget is not yet approved. So, there are some sort of assumptions or hopes in terms of what that budget will be. Assuming it's on track with what we have this year, then we think we'll, be able to afford this project and future projects as well. So with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Questions or comments? Dharma?
Thank you. Is there the opportunity in situations like these where it might take us a couple of years to get to the construction to use the plastic device, the rubber devices that I think that we talked about getting at one point?
We have talked about that. We're thinking about using some of those temporary devices for maybe the speed management program. And we had that was one of the suggestions as part of the traffic calming resolution, was a sort of try before you buy option. We haven't explored that option with this, and even the procurement of those devices up front would still have some cost. I can't recall what the cost of speed humps would be. So it's not something we've contemplated right now. I think we're just trying to hopefully construct those in permanence, when the fiscal year comes up and when that construction budget is more intact. So no, it's not programmed to use temporary devices at this time.
And so, yeah, this will be taking place during the 24 calendar year construction season. But does it have to be in the 25 fiscal year? So like after July 1st of next year? Okay.
Yeah.
What other questions or comments? I certainly appreciate this project. I'm honestly surprised it made it this far. I mean, not made it, but it took this long to get this petition before us, because that's a very common cut through in this area. That's a busy intersection, and I know a lot of people will cut through the neighborhood using Baldwin. So I am happy to see this. I'm happy for that neighborhood. All right, if there's no other questions or comments, is there a motion to recommend approval of the Baldwin traffic calming project between Packard and Stadium? Moved by Julie, seconded by Dharma. So all those in favor of the motion, please say yes or raise your hands. Okay, all opposed, please say no or raise your hands. All right, the motion passes. Very good. Next up, Manchester from Buckingham.
I'm sorry, Brett, who were those motion and second by? I missed that.
Motion by Julie and seconded by Dharma. That's right.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, the petition process for the Manchester traffic calming between Buckingham and Needham is now complete also. And it's before us for a recommendation. So Raymond, if you could review the Manchester traffic calming project.
Yes, indeed. So Manchester between Buckingham and Needham, again, we received the petition. It did receive support from the neighborhood, which brings it to you. There are two proposed devices. There is a raised crosswalk right at the Nottingham Road intersection, and then about 270 feet to the south, it looks like, is a speed hump. And the project cost for this is similar to the last one, which is $35,000. But again, it's being deferred to fiscal year 2025 because of that budget issue that I already discussed. And so with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have.
What questions do people have? Any? All right. Seeing none, is there a motion to recommend approval of the Manchester traffic calming project between Buckingham and Needham? Moved by Julie, seconded by Megan. All those in favor of the motion, please say yes or raise your hand. All right, all those opposed to the motion, please say no or raise your hand. The motion passes. All right, now, next topic, traffic calming resolution. The traffic calming subcommittee has finalized their work on a draft resolution related to proposed changes to the neighborhood traffic calming program. So Dharma, if as a representative of that subcommittee, if you could review the project.
Yeah, happy to. Just to let people know, unfortunately, Molly couldn't make it, but she's been part of the follow-up discussion and the whole process. I'm just really excited to bring this forward because it's been a long conversation and a lot of work and thought has been put into this. So I'm excited to be discussing it again tonight. I wanted to start with a recap of kind of what brought us to where we are now. You all formed this subcommittee, I think back in the fall before I was on council or the liaison, to provide suggestions on how to improve the neighborhood traffic calming program. We've met a lot since November to discuss challenges with the program as it exists now. And some of those highlights include expense and staff capacity. Some of that's been relieved by bringing contract help to help evaluate the petitions, but also assigning more money from the council budgets. The fact that even when a speeding or a traffic problem is agreed on and petitions have been, all the work has been done to go into it, it could be disqualified as a result of not getting a majority of support. So that's a big investment of time, staff, and effort to see no solution. The difficulty of qualifying because there's a certain threshold of neighborhood signatures needed to even move a petition forward. And sometimes this can be particularly hard with like apartment building kinds of situations. An additional challenge, City Council currently maintains authority over this program. So they maintain authority over the individual traffic calming project plans. And that's why, for example, we had 2 tonight that will also go to council for approval, even though these plans are an implementation of council approved policy. So it's quite unique in terms of programs. And then last but not least, this came up a lot, vertical traffic calming elements like speed humps, raised crosswalks, and the like are deployed exclusively as part of the neighborhood traffic calming program. And hence they're kind of limited by the special budget that we have and the special process that we have that has significant oversight and overhead. So we brought a first version of this to you all about a couple months ago. And I guess I just want to start by thanking everybody who gave input to that because it gave us a lot to think about. In that version, we suggested the consideration of bump outs on all roads projects, and some of the feedback that I took away from our discussion of that first version was a desire to be even more prescriptive in our language, as well as people noted that we did not specifically call out the use of vertical calming elements. So that was a big oversight. So we took that discussion back to our working group and staff. We kind of refocused on what problems we were trying to solve, and the result is what you see before you today. I was also fortunate that I think shortly after our discussion on this the first time, I attended a couple of meetings related to the Greenview project. And I got to see firsthand the way that staff uses information gained over years to assess what needs to be done on a street. And so in the case of Greenview, it's a cut-through street. There's been, longstanding complaints about speeding. It's just pretty much a straight cut through. It's part of an all ages, all abilities network. And so a variety of these factors made staff approach this project knowing that speeds needed to be slowed on this cut through. And in those meetings, it was interesting to hear everybody talk about how speed was a concern, but then staff introduced the topic by saying, but these kinds of elements are off the table because they're part of the neighborhood traffic calming. We don't use vertical elements like speed humps, except as part of that council program. And if you're interested in doing that, you can wait for this project to be over and then you can submit a petition for neighborhood traffic calming and we'll consider it. So I think, that just, I think, reminded us all of one of the big issues that we're trying to solve, which is that we should be addressing these issues as we're working on roads projects, not as a completely separate offshoot. That said, this is a popular program. There are aspects of the petition process that empowers neighborhoods to raise issues. So we didn't get completely rid of that. So that remains the same. So I guess with all of that said, you guys have a clean version and you have one that highlights the changes. I'll highlight, I guess I'll just go ahead and read the resolved clauses again and maybe just highlight where there are changes. That seems like an okay approach. So first resolved clause, Transportation Commission recommends that City Council pass a resolution to empower the administrator to manage and maintain the neighborhood traffic calming program and remove the requirement of City Council approval for individual calming project plans. That is the same as it was before.
Right, that's maybe I'm thinking maybe after each resolve clause, we'll stop and see if there's any
Sure.
questions.
No problem. Yeah.
So the first one is kind of, well, are there any questions or comments on the first one about empowering the administrator to manage and maintain the neighborhood traffic calming program and remove the requirement of City Council to approve individual plans? I guess I have a question. The Transportation Commission isn't mentioned as far as requiring our approval for individual project plans. I assume we wouldn't be required to approve individual plans. Is that true?
Yeah, that's correct. And I think we discussed this a little bit last time. It basically means we would not be getting the presentation. If this passes council, we would not be getting these.
We could. I mean, I think it'd still be interesting. I think some people would, I mean, hopefully these projects and this type of work would be more widespread, but I'm sure we'll get updates on individual projects still. And
yeah, that makes sense. I wonder, Raymond, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I would definitely think they would show up in the monthly report as a minimum. And as we would typically do, we wouldn't just say, hey, traffic calming went in yesterday. We would kind of add it to say, this project is in a process, or, and we would give you updates in a sort of more informal fashion, probably, but through that monthly update at a minimum.
Okay.
Probably much like we see the update for the Greenview and South 7th project in this packet, I noticed. Yeah.
Right. We're still going to have have stuff to talk about every month, right? So I'm sure these will come up. All right. Any other questions or comments on the first resolve clause? Okay.
Okay. Resolve the Transportation Commission recommends that City Council maintain or increase the current level of funding in order to accelerate the process of petition-led neighborhood requests for traffic calming and meet the demand. Again, this is unchanged from the first time that we discussed it. Although I think actually we did change or increase. That might be one minor change.
Any comments? So I mean, this implies that there will still be a dedicated program, right? It's not just, we're not just counting on this work to be part of normal projects. There will still be a place that residents can go and request work done outside of a repaving or resurfacing project, right? So I'm pointing out that this, implies that there will still be a program, right?
Yes.
All right.
All right. Transportation Commission recommends that City Council direct staff to amend the neighborhood traffic calming program to a collaborative model of public engagement instead of the current empowerment model. And this is unchanged, but as a reminder, this refers to the spectrum of public engagement that I believe that we shared with you last time. We're on the very far end. Empowerment model is basically what's enabling what is giving this requirement of 51%, I believe, must say yes in order for it to happen. The collaborative model is still engages with the neighborhood, solicits feedback on what is needed and what is wanted, much like you saw on the South 7th project or the Greenview project, but does not allow projects to be vetoed because they don't meet a majority. Right, Raymond?
Yeah, that's my understanding of this resolve clause. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so that will show up in the City Council resolution, the fact that we're not going to rely on votes, but okay. All right, cool.
Right, I think Julie's got her hand up.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see it. Yeah, go ahead.
Just a quick question. So what are the criteria for the project to move forward? I mean, you're taking out that 51% requirement, and what's left?
So I think, do you want to chime in, Raymond, or do you want me to go with the intent?
Yeah, go ahead with the intent, and then I can maybe tease out how we might see it play out.
So our intent is really that once for the petition part of this program, once it meets a level of identifying that something needs to be done, then it's more about the details. So something is going to happen to address the problem. What happens is going to rely on the feedback from the neighborhood, but ultimately staff is going to make a decision and communicate it like they do with other projects.
Thanks. That sounds great.
Cool. Moving on. All right. Okay, so this is the bigger change. Resolved, the Transportation Commission recommends that City Council direct staff to routinely evaluate opportunities to incorporate traffic calming elements into all capital projects which disturb the existing road surface, particularly those that are part of an all ages, all abilities network identified in the transportation plan, in a school walk zone, where a record of crashes, speeding, and or resident complaints exist, or otherwise suggest a need for calming to enhance comfort and safety for non-motorized users, regardless of petition status.
Yeah, this is the meat of it here. I like saying this. Comments, Peter?
I like this clause. I guess the only thing I find lacking in it is how do we know when we've done enough? And if we have a neighborhood that wants more, we could like keep putting in more because that's what they keep asking for. Or we have a neighborhood that doesn't want features on their street, even if it is designated as all ages and abilities, we could end up with a street that doesn't have enough because that's the feedback that they keep giving us. I would like to put a metric on this, like if we had a target vehicle speed that we were going for, then we could measure before a project and know that we are well above our target speed of 20 miles per hour, let's say, and that we need to do a lot on the street. And then when we're done, we could measure again and see, okay, we've gotten down to, 20 miles per hour or whatever our target is, we've achieved it. Or we might find out, no, we didn't make it down to 20. We're still at something higher than what we want. We know we need to do more. So is there a way to add a metric here to achieve that? Like, so that we know when we need to spend the money and like when we don't. Maybe we have streets that already meet that just because of the features that they have.
So one thing that I would say, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead, Brett, if that's okay. Not following Robert's rules, sorry. I just wanted to respond to the first part of that, which is that I don't think that it's accurate to say that it's possible for someone to say, even though it's on an all ages, all abilities network, that nothing should change. I mean, I've seen this play out quite recently on the Greenview project where people literally asked, why can't we just keep it the same? There's no problem. And I heard staff tell them repeatedly, status quo is not okay, because we know that there's an issue here. It's part of an all ages, all abilities network. And our transportation plan and our values say this. So just wanted to put a pin in that first part. As to whether about metrics, I guess, I don't know if Raymond could speak more to process and yeah.
Yeah, I think, I appreciate Pete's suggestion. It's many of our traffic calming petitions are different in nature. So we have some traffic calming petitions that come in where we already have traffic calming established, and there was the 85th percentile was 18 miles per hour, for example. So, we honored the request for more traffic calming because the neighborhood wanted more traffic calming. Then in other instances, we've had traffic calming petitions that have failed, which, at the end of the day, the petition didn't reach support among the neighborhood and therefore didn't pass. So again, a lot of the metrics we've been using to date have largely been driven by the neighborhood in terms of, whether they want it, if they want more, if they don't want it. In terms of whether, what metric we should use is, you mentioned speed. I think, that's a good one to talk about. there are probably others in terms of, but as you know, a lot of the safety metrics we look at don't really play out in the neighborhood streets, in terms of crashes and things like that. Very rarely do we actually see a lot of crash, especially severe crashes in the neighborhood. So it's always hard for us to kind of weigh, this petition against that petition when it's not really an apples to apples comparison. So it's just a long way of saying I don't off the top of my head know what a good metric would be. And your suggestion of speed makes sense, but at the same time, what is that speed, right? Is it 20? Well, 20 is below the allowable minimum state posted speed limit, which is 25 in the state. If you didn't know that, I think you've heard me say this before. The state minimum allowable speed is 25 miles per hour. So, I think just using those kind of as a metric would be the thing that we would have to look at. So, yeah, I'm happy to hear other suggestions from other commission members if this is something that they want to entertain.
If I can clarify, I think that it would be okay for us to design a street to encourage people to drive 20 miles per hour on it, even though the speed limit by the state has to be 25. I think I'm correct about that, right?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Right. If I can, Brett, I would also like to add that I thought that we had a lot of difficulty at 7th and Greenview on people, a lot of disagreement about what to do. And one of the things that I thought helped sort of break that log jam was when we got the data that showed how fast people were really going on 7th. And then having something to work towards, which in this case was lowering the speed that people were going, really seems to, I don't know, that seemed to help that whole process. And one of the reasons I'm suggesting this, using a metric like this, is to make processes like that easier for staff in the future, so that we have a little bit of less of that kind of difficulty and animosity that I saw during the 7th and Greenview process.
So my impression is that there's nothing in here that would at all preclude metrics, including speed, being tracked before or after a project, especially before. I imagine that in certain cases, like on 7th, maybe the city would be interested in assessing speeds beforehand. But I don't think anything in there precludes that, but I am wary of requiring it, because I think a lot of the neighborhood streets would not, doing a speed study would not show a lot of speeds above 25, but I don't want to have to rely on demonstrating that people are speeding. That's not the only aggressive behavior, or the only behavior that needs addressing with a program like this. So I think this takes, which is being open up to allowing any sort of metric to be used, but I personally would be worried about requiring that metric, because I don't think a lot of projects would pass that particular metric. I think there are other ways, maybe some more subjective things that are hard to measure, that make neighbors want treatments like this to be done. So that's my impression. Julie?
What Peter says does resonate with me. And I mean, maybe one way to think about it is that if we, as a matter of course, gathered whatever metrics, but maybe speed included, and one project, had average speeds of, 35 in a residential neighborhood, and the other one had average speeds of 22, then maybe we could prioritize the one with higher speed so that it would get funded in the current fiscal year as opposed to the next fiscal, I mean, there seems like it should matter. And I know that part of the problem is having resources to do these speed studies. But I mean, it does seem to me that that should matter and affect our prioritization.
Yeah, again, I think speed matters, and there's nothing here to prevent the city from doing that. I just don't know that we want to rely on it or put it, write it into a ordinance. That's my only concern. Dharma?
Yeah, I'm also worried that it makes it harder when I think that we're trying to lower the barrier to get a variety of different treatments, including for speed. But just as an example, it kind of came off the top of my head, Arella is a street where the issue is frequent, what do you call it? Not stopping for the stop sign, failure to yield. That's the formal term. And I also am a little bit worried about creating, there's not only like just the barrier of cost. Like, I just don't know. I like giving staff the tool to do it, but I'm a little bit concerned that if we say, and thou shalt go out and measure speed on each road before and after, I'm worried that it slows things down and we get less done.
Peter?
I would just like to reiterate that I offered up speed as an example of a metric, and that my desire was for metrics around this program, and I offered up speed as one example of a metric. The compliance rate of crosswalks might be another important metric that we want to check, or compliance rate for stop signs might be another important metric. Regardless, what I'm looking for is some way to measure that we have achieved what we set out to do. And as Julie brought up, that's a really good point too, some way to help prioritize. What we've seen here is that we got a couple of very low cost traffic calming projects that we just approved that seemed like kind of a simple decision to approve those. But in previous meetings, we've had projects that were $100 or more $1,000, much more expensive. Are we sure that we're really putting the money where it should be and really prioritizing, spending all of this year's budget on those projects? Does it really make sense? I don't know. I don't know how to compare the metrics between the two smaller projects that we did today and the ones we've done previously. So without that kind of data, it's really tough to say that we're doing the right thing.
Other comments? For me, I'm conflicted. More data is always good. There's no doubt about that. I'm just struggling with how to and whether we should include it in this resolution as a requirement. I guess first of all, looking at the entirety of this, would this be the spot? Or is this addressed later on? I don't really think it is. I don't think there's a mention of metrics later on. As a person who is on the subcommittee, Dharma, do you think there's an appetite, having been through all the meetings, for a generic statement on metrics? Raymond, that's something that's feasible from a city perspective. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
I guess my first thought is I understand the impulse about data. I love data. And I agree that being able to quantify a speed problem is often helpful in discussions where it seems like the discussion has become intractable. But again, I feel like we have the tools to do that. And I guess I kind of feel like we're getting, to me, a little bit off track from the problems that this resolution was aiming to solve. Which again was that, like, we pretty much don't do traffic calming, quote unquote, as part of our construction projects, and we leave certain tools off the table. So that's mostly what we were focused on addressing, and those are my initial thoughts.
Yeah, along those lines, I thought a large part of a large intent of this is that we include traffic calming devices and things from that toolkit as a matter of course, and which would imply that we don't necessarily need to justify. It should be part of the standard. It should be as standard as putting down paint, or as standard as putting in curbs. Should be putting in curb cutouts. Should be putting in narrower lanes. So I just worry that putting an emphasis on data implies that we need to justify these actions. And I do understand from a prioritization aspect, though I'm not sure we could really get a full, wrap ourselves hands all around all these projects every year. I just worry that more data could be used to justify not doing some of these things in some cases, or lack of data, lack of the right data. If we don't go searching for the exact right thing, could convince people that we shouldn't be doing some of these. That's a concern I have. Peter?
So the last time we discussed this, we were focusing on bump outs at corners as a way to calm traffic. And Dharma, I remember you mentioned that you didn't think that bump outs were strictly needed on your street, for example. That may be true. I was thinking of my own street, though, which is a court that only has 8 residences on it. And by conventional wisdom, like, we wouldn't need traffic calming on a court that is, only has 4 houses on each side of the street. But then I was thinking to myself, man, the FedEx truck goes up the hill on my street and is going so fast. And it used to be so frightening to me as, a parent, when I was a parent of young kids, to have them out, when delivery drivers or, even other people who live on my street would enter onto our court. And I thought to myself, I would really have liked to have had a bump out there, even though, sort of conventional wisdom says we wouldn't need it on a street like that. That's why I thought that it would be nice to, as a matter of course, have some metrics around whether street needs this sort of treatment, rather than just relying on conventional wisdom. Because, when I look at my own experience in my neighborhood, it really feels like we need it, even though ordinarily I wouldn't have thought on a court that you did need it. So that's where I was coming from on my desire for metrics, or that's what got me thinking about it.
We'll let Raymond go first.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to possibly share with you real quickly is how the current program is structured and how we evaluate petitions, because I think it might address some of the discussion that we're having. So allow me to share my screen for just a second. And I want to bring this to your attention because while there are a lot of substantive changes that are being proposed as part of this resolution, if this gets approved by council, I think a lot of the framework and bones of the program will probably remain similar or intact, right? Because this isn't a complete, we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right? We're keeping a lot of the elements still in place. So I bring this up because when we talk about metrics, we talk about data collection, these are the things we're currently doing with every petition, right? So the first thing is, we have a fairly high threshold that number of signatures required from the neighborhood, right? Because we really want to show some initial interest from the neighborhood that the old program was a lower threshold, and what we were finding is a smaller group of people would get the petition in the queue, but then there was a lot of opposition when we got through the program. So now what we've done is you need at least 50% of people to qualify to ask for traffic calming to begin with. Now, as we move towards kind of the collaborate model away from the empower model, maybe we revisit this piece. But then we do collect speed data, and so one of the things to note here is, and this was something we vetted with the subcommittee that worked on this last time, is if speeds are lower, if the 85th percentile is actually lower than the posted speed, you actually will get a negative point that takes away from your total points. And again, this kind of speaks to the prioritization and all the things that we just talked about, that if you don't really have a speeding problem, maybe traffic calming isn't the right tool, but you can still qualify for the program. And if you have a serious speeding problem, if you're going 30 miles per hour or more, you only need 10 points to qualify. So you can see that if you get a lot of signatures and or you have a speeding problem and or you have a lot of people who are violating the posted speed, any one of those will really kind of tip you over the scales and get you into the program. We also take traffic counts. That's part of the program. We look at crash history. We look at school travel as well. And then we look at any of the major pedestrian attractors and generators. So these are the things, I mean, these are, when we talk about metrics or data that's collected, these are the things we're doing as part of the current program. I would anticipate much of that would still be collected as part of any revision to the program. If there's a discussion about, we should have a minimum or a maximum or whatever under some of these categories, we're open to those conversations. But I did want to kind of maybe reassure you that there is a lot of data collection and analysis that goes into all these petitions already.
That's great to hear. I guess first I wanted to go back to something that Pete said, which is that I wasn't using conventional wisdom. I was using, much like you are, kind of my observed experience of living on the street. And I would imagine in both cases, those are going to come to bear on any construction project like they do now. So, it's not because you live on a cul-de-sac that it's just X, but that you have the lived experience of seeing this behavior quite often, whereas I just don't on my street. But I appreciate you pulling that up, Raymond, and I wonder what your thoughts are about how you would apply it in a world, if this gets passed, in which we are thinking about this on, outside of the petition process, in addition to the petition process. Could you use it as a scoring framework when you think about prioritizing improvement projects, for example, and doing these kind of calming interventions?
Yeah, I appreciate the sentiment. What we're trying to achieve is, addressing the areas of highest need. I think one of the unintended consequences might be someone who qualifies for the petition. Let's say, for example, they get 11 points, and I'll use these terms generically, but let's say they get 11 points out of the 10 that are required. But then the next 10 petitions that come in get 12 points. And so they may be in the queue for a very long time. And, quite frankly, that's one of the things we're trying to get caught up on right now, is to petitions that have been in the queue for a couple of years, trying to get caught up on those. It would feel a little disingenuous that, congratulations, you've qualified, you're in the program. Oh, but you just got trumped by the next one because they scored more points than you, and you get trumped by the next one. So I think procedurally that might be difficult for us to explain to residents, because it's difficult to explain it to them now when we say, you're a couple of years out from implementation. And then the other thing to note here is, a lot of times there is without a doubt speeding on some of the residential roads. So I don't want to be dismissive of that, especially the areas that have cut through, especially areas that are unfortunately, ingress and egress to schools. There are definitely some issues out there, but a lot of the local neighborhood streets sometimes may not actually be experiencing a very much of a speeding problem, right? I mean, we've had some petitions, like I said before, where the 85th percentile was 18 miles per hour. So, what would I do with a petition like that? If we have a metric, if we have a bare minimum, would we just say, no, you're not allowed? And that would probably not resonate well with people who really want to see something done on their street. So again, I'm really looking to you all for direction in terms of like what you would want to achieve with it. So then that way I can try to fulfill your intent and your interest, because I don't think there's a right answer. I don't think there's a wrong answer, but I would want to fulfill the desire of what it is you're trying to achieve and make sure that we do so faithfully.
Pete?
I guess I'm wondering how would that scoring sheet be applied to a traffic calming project that doesn't have a petition associated with it and is just part of the a capital improvement project.
The way I'm interpreting the resolution is a capital improvement program, which includes vertical elements, would be treated much the same way we did like 7th and Greenview. It would be an engagement process. It would just be adding those tools into the toolkit. So that's the way I'm reading this resolution. It's not that we're going to implement we're not going to require a petition. It's just, hey, we're doing a capital project here. We know you have a speeding problem. Staff is suggesting as part of the tool a raised crosswalk, for example. But that would be a different kind of trajectory for a program capital project versus a neighborhood who's coming to the city requesting traffic calming on a road that doesn't have any program project, in which case they would follow a process, slightly different from what we have today, but similar in form, where we would collect the data, we would analyze it, we would, determine if they qualify. We'd go through a couple rounds of meetings to come up with a solution. And then in this case, there would not be a final vote among the neighborhood if this resolution passes in its current form, because we're moving away from the empowerment model and as is suggested, moving to a collaboration model. So, we work on solution sets and then we ultimately move forward with the project.
Okay, I guess that answered my question.
Other comments? All right. I want to keep going through the resolve clauses then, Dharma.
Great. I think the next one is the biggest change. Before we had a resolution that was basically like use a bump out consider using a bump out on every project. So this makes it broader and actually gets us to the issue of leaving certain elements off of the table when it's not part of the formalized program. So the Transportation Commission recommends that City Council direct staff to consider the full range of established speed control elements as identified by NACTO, the Institute of Transportation Engineers, or the Federal Highway Administration, or tools identified in the traffic calming program and the speed management program, including vertical devices such as raised crosswalks, speed humps, speed cushions, as well as bump outs, chicanes, narrowing, etc., all in capital improvements planning projects that disturb the road surface. And just to add a little editorial, when we talked through this with staff, it was nice to see the light bulbs go off on all of the ways in which they would have used this if this were a policy in place for recent projects. So that, I don't know, it's just a good moment.
Comments? I very much like the changes you made. I really, I like everything in this. Yeah. All right, next one.
The next two are unchanged. Transportation Commission recommends the development of a school traffic calming toolkit. That was part of our transportation plan. Transportation Commission, I guess I'll stop. Sorry, just flying through.
I think the question I have for that one relates to the last resolve clause. So why don't we go ahead and read that too?
Okay, the Transportation Commission's Neighborhood Traffic Calming Committee will continue to work with staff to further define the updates to these programs.
So my question is development of a school traffic calming toolkit. Would that be part of the subcommittee? And so the subcommittee would keep going on. And would the development of the school traffic calming toolkit take place?
My understanding was our intent was to kind of, since this is a big change, to kind of just be able to monitor it and see how it's going. The new traffic calming. the school traffic calming toolkit, I think this is just a recommendation to staff, Raymond, if I remember correctly, because you guys work in collaboration with the school and that group has been revived. Am I right?
Yeah, there's the Transportation Safety Committee that's organized by the Ann Arbor Public Schools. They're on hiatus for the summer, but they have been meeting before school let out for a couple meetings. So that could be one, place to work it through. I would imagine it would probably be more of a staff to staff process to begin with to work on a draft. And then we would probably, feed it up to different bodies when it's at a point where it's ready to be reviewed.
Okay. One other final question I have. Passage of this wouldn't affect all of the projects that are currently in the queue, I assume, right? It might lessen the load on, or the vote, it might remove the voting requirement or something of the projects that are already in the queue, but they'll still remain in the queue, right?
That's my understanding and I think our intent.
Yeah, I think my understanding is consistent with Dharma's. I think it is something we might need to think through if we do transition away from empowerment to more collaborate model. If this group is comfortable with that, if the petitioners are comfortable with that, making sure that we don't do like a bait and switch sort of thing. I think in our early meetings, we talked about whether folks are grandfathered into the existing program or they are subjected to the new. And I don't think we 100% resolve that here, but that might be a topic we could continue to work through with the subcommittee if that's the desire. So.
Okay. So I think we read through all the resolve clauses. Are there any other final thoughts or questions before we go to a vote on this? Any other recommendations or anything else anyone wants to say? Okay. All right. So with that, is there a motion to recommend approval of the resolution included in the packet, which suggests changes to the traffic calming program? Moved by Julie, seconded by Megan. All those in favor of the motion, please say yes or raise your hand. All right. All those opposed to the motion, please say no or raise your hand. All right, looks like the motion.
Can't you say yes?
Oh, you said yes. Larry said yes, okay. All right, the motion passes. So thank you very much to the subcommittee for all your work on this and continued work in the future. Best wishes bringing this to council, Dharma, hopefully in the near future.
I plan to. It's been a long time in coming, so I'm eager.
All right. Next up is the bylaws amendment. At the last meeting, City Council postponed action on changes to our proposed bylaws amendment to allow us to consider a member who is 55 years of age or older. So Raymond, if you could review what was discussed by council.
Yes, thank you. I did share on the screen. I did get some language today from legal. It's hopefully not a surprise to you. What they are actually recommending is that under Article 4 of membership, which was the part that was suggested for change when these changes were first proposed. Currently, the bylaws read 6 members of the public. And then the second provision was 1 owner or operator of a transportation business operating in Ann Arbor. The change that was suggested last year was to remove that second provision and increase the number of members of the public to 7. So that would still stand. So it would read 7 members of the public, comma, 1 of whom shall be 55 years of age or older. And again, this is meant to address a discussion that happened at City Council during the second reading of the ordinance of this bylaws change amendment. Council had postponed action on this for this consideration to add this stipulation for one of the seats on the Transportation Commission. And so they had asked to bring it back to Transportation Commission, which is where we are today. And then, your recommendation will be forwarded back to City Council if you're in favor of this suggestion, or otherwise, we'll do that. One other thing I will also just completely own on this, I will apologize. This bylaws amendment was approved by the commission, I think in September of last year. And it took me entirely too long to kind of finally process it and get it through to council. So I take full responsibility of that. Not to say that has any bearing as to why this happened the way it did, or what council's action is, but I did want to apologize that it took me longer than it should have to get this in front of council. So anyway, that is the discussion. I don't know, Dharma, I believe you were at the meeting last week as well, if there's anything more to add to that, or if that captured most of the discussion related to this piece.
I think it captures most of it. I think just the rationale was our priorities to support people aging in place, to recognize that older people perhaps rely more on the bus. And so those were some of the points that I heard Councilmember Harrison bring up as she brought this forward. I'm in a little bit of an odd position just because, as you indicated, when this passed before, I wasn't here. So there's been a little bit of information carryover, but my understanding was part of the rationale for bringing the original bylaws change forward was because we've had trouble filling positions. So anyway, that's all that I heard discussed there. A little bit, I guess a little bit of, there was Councilmember Briggs brought up the concern that, like one of our callers, public commenters did, that age group tends to be overrepresented, as indicated in the equitable engagement report. So.
All right, Julie.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I fit that criterion, and I think there might be at least one other current member who fits that criterion. Like, I'm just wondering if it's a problem that doesn't need to be solved. But yeah.
Wanu?
Yeah, I see the point of it. I was at a city council coffee hour thing over at it was one of the coffee hours. Can't remember exact location, but the discussions actually were very vibrant around downtown parking and things like that, and to get the viewpoints of somebody who has is older and doesn't want to bike, right, but wants to take the bus or things of that nature. So I see the validity of it, but I also see Julie's point, right? It seems like we do have representation. My question to you, Raymond, is legal was cool with this to put kind of like in the bylaws, like an age kind of distinction. Legal was okay with it.
Yeah, I think they had looked into it and they provided the language. So yeah, I think they're comfortable with the language as it was proposed.
Okay, yeah, I see the point of it. I love seeing, again, that the viewpoints and the perspectives. I think it's important. So, but I do also get Julie's perspective too. Is it a problem that necessarily needs to be fixed? We do have the representation, but I don't mind this being in there. So, so yeah, I'm cool with it.
Pete?
My sense is that, or my opinion on this is that all stages of life have unique transportation challenges, and I mean the ones that I'm most familiar with right now are the fact that my children don't have access to the sort of the predominant transportation mode, which is cars, because they're not old enough. And so, like, the parents of children who can't drive have unique transportation difficulties that they need help with. They also have the challenge of not not having a spare time because they are, parents of small children, and that's part of why I think they are underrepresented on boards and commissions, is because they are busy raising families and so forth. So I guess what I see is that there's lots of different ages and different groups that do have unique transportation challenges, and that we might want to encourage to be involved so that we can get their participation. But I guess I'm not in favor of calling out one of those specific age groups and setting aside a spot specifically for them. I also don't think that it will be particularly difficult to, just by virtue of the fact that so many of them participate in government, I don't think it'll be difficult to find someone or find an additional member who is above 55. So I guess I'm not in favor of adding this restriction. So I do not want to do it.
I've got a question, or probably a couple questions. First of all, I recently saw a list of, or I saw the applicants, the pool of applicants for the Transportation Commission. And having gone through the application process myself, I noticed that I don't think there is a demographic question for age currently. And in fact, the only demographic information that is included in applications was redacted. And I don't think age is one of them anyway. So is that something we currently, is it even feasible to know the age of the person? I imagine even if it were a question, it would be an optional. Is this something, if this passed, would city staff have to revise the application process for us?
I would imagine so. I would think I'd have to work with the city clerk's office. They're the ones that administer those, but just to let them know that this change has been made and it has to be something that has to be included on the application, either as a voluntary question, are you 55 age and are you interested in filling that seat, or just as a general, date of birth on all applications. But I have to defer to them in terms of what that would look like.
All right, I also noticed.
Is my hand showing?
What was that?
Is my hand raising showing?
Oh, no, it's not, but please go ahead, Larry.
Oh, I raised my hand. Sometimes I wonder, instead of hand raised, two things. One, I'm 60. Two, you wouldn't trust me to drive because I can't see nothing, so I take both A right and M. Line bus quite often, so you're kind of filled there. And also, when the Commission on Disability Issues, we asked people to whether they're willing to disclose the disability, but we keep it sort of secret. I mean, sort of, it's optional, but we don't publicize what their disability is or anything like that. And that's how you probably do that to the age too. Would be my guess. So you could ask them to state their age, and if they chose, they wouldn't necessarily, they could keep the age confidential, I guess, except for the people on the commission or whatever.
All right, thank you. Jean-Luc?
So I'm somewhat unfamiliar with the 55 requirement, but so could it be worded at like zero car or car light in a way that you're still getting the same goal? So like there could be a very vibrant 85-year-old who drives every day, and they would probably be less representative of a 53-year-old who's disabled who takes the bus. So I guess either zero car or car light, or like how Pete, I think it was Pete said that he had small kids. Like I feel like a single parent, in some way it might be hard to make a criteria for how do you define zero car, but like if you're a parent who has to drive their kid you know about your child not having a car, so it's kind of, I don't know. I feel like some other criteria besides age would be more representative of what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I'll say Councilmember Harrison isn't here, so I'm not sure, other than based on just watching the meeting, the city council meeting, I'm not totally sure her intent, whether it was car free or car light, or I know she mentioned bus usage. Which part of that made me wonder if maybe would this be better applied to the AAATA board? I don't know. Because you mentioned like service times and weekend bus availability, things like that, which we don't really directly control in this commission. But yeah, I can't speak for the council member and what she had intended. But Dharma.
Thank you. Just wanted to speak to a lot of what I think that I'm hearing and the values that I have and that I've heard a lot on council, which I think is diversity of membership. We've talked about how there's a lot of different ways that you can slice and dice, and how perhaps, singling out one of those things in our bylaws may or may not be advantageous. I did look at some language from other bylaws for other committees. And for example, ICPOC calls out diversity of membership, that it will strive to ensure that the overall membership of the commission reflects the city's diverse population, including, and they call out certain things in theirs that are very appropriate to ICPOC. And I wonder if we were going to make any change, if that's perhaps gets more at what I'm hearing you all talk about.
I think that's a great idea, Dharma, to investigate some statement like that reflects the important cross section, the cross section of the community that is important for transportation issues, that needs to be represented within transportation. So I think that would be a great thing to investigate, and maybe a way to get at what was being proposed and during the council meeting. And also thank you for doing the research into other bylaws. That was something that I wanted to do and didn't get around to myself. So.
Megan?
Yeah, I just agree with everything we've been saying. I think I completely support the goal of having diverse perspectives. But yeah, as we've been saying, age is not necessarily a proxy for some of the issues that we an exact proxy for some of the stuff that we discuss. So yeah, I think I agree with Pete and Dharma that it might be good to think through a statement that represents our commitment to this without necessarily specifying an age cutoff, or yeah.
Yeah, when I was vice chair with Molly, we kind of brainstormed about what such a list of diverse items would, diverse qualities would look like. And it was really kind of hard to nail it down, but we thought of things like parts of the city that you live in, and income, and do you rent or own, and we were thinking about age in there too. So I really like the idea, but I think it is key to decide exactly what the right categories are. It seems more that in looking at the pool of people who apply, we try and sort of fill some gaps that aren't, some perspectives that aren't represented. But again, we don't necessarily know what you all, I don't know who rents or owns on this panel, and I don't know what perspectives are already there. And we talked about having really changing the application a lot to try and gather a lot of that information. And I think the problem was that the same application is used for all commissions, and so couldn't just tailor to our needs. So I don't know. I think diverse perspectives are important, and maybe the best we can do is just to say that, but a list would be good. To agree upon a list.
Larry, you got something?
No. Maybe my hand forgot to go down.
Okay. Yeah, I like Julie was saying, I feel like maybe a better or more effective approach would be to add some of this information onto the city application. So the other thing I wanted to mention is that it seems like this would be applied in the nomination process, which is at the will of the city mayor, right? So really up to the mayor to look through the applicants and whatever the information is on the applications to decide who to put forward, who to nominate as a mayor. So, a statement encouraging diverse opinions, whatever we might consider saying, wouldn't really, it wouldn't force anything. There wouldn't be any teeth to it, of course. It's ultimately that's up to the mayor. If we wanted to force something, then we could do it in the bylaws, and that would have that effect. But otherwise, it depends on the will of the mayor, I think. Dharma?
This is just because I haven't seen us put anyone new forward on this particular commission, and it seems to work a little bit differently with respect to ZBA, just because I think ZBA is somewhat special. But I think aren't you empowered? I mean, don't we actually put someone forward to the mayor? Like, I think the chair usually of the commission, along with me, is the one that would carry and recommend someone. And then
yeah, but I mean, ultimately it's up to the mayor to say.
Sure, but it matters a lot, our recommendation, I would say, what winds up in, So
that's what we do.
Yeah, okay.
The Commission on Disability Issues. I'm the guy who does it, so that's how come I know.
Pete?
So I guess do other commissions keep track of demographics within the commission? I mean, is that something that we have ever done here? I mean, even if it's anonymous, it might be helpful to know that we are lacking representation in some particular demographic that isn't obvious. I mean, that would help the people who put forth the nominations for new members. It would help them to know that, oh, this is a place where we are not well represented. We need to be looking for someone like this. Does that question make sense? I mean, is that something that we have ever considered or that other boards or commissions do?
We do a little of that. We just want to keep it that we have a certain percentage of, so the majority of our commission is made up of people with disabilities, although people without disabilities can also be on it, but we want the commission to have predominantly people with disabilities to improve that voice. So we do a little of that. But that's pretty much it.
Okay. It could be worthwhile to try and collect that information. Like if we decide what are the important demographic characteristics that we want to concern ourselves with. I mean, is that something that we can collect about our body and track? Right? And we can see that, for example, certain populations or neighborhoods are underrepresented. You know, if we were to start tracking it, then we would know where we need to be doing the outreach to, in order to make sure that they are properly represented.
Yeah, I don't know of any such, tracking or surveys. Like I was saying earlier, the applicants, which I just received like yesterday, I think, the only demographic information that was present was redacted. So, all I have are names and responses to questions.
Okay, all right. Do you see my point though about at least a questionnaire for the current members? Like it might be helpful to know what we have now so that we know where we are missing, where we have holes, and where we need to be looking for participants. If that makes sense. Is that something that we could propose as an annual self-examination that we do of our board? Like, is that something that we can take a look at annually so that we know how we need to be changing our board and keeping it representative, or how we need to be looking for the right people to keep it representative?
So, I mean, yeah, I'm not the one to answer that or make that decree. Are you proposing something that would be specific to our commission and the 7 members of the public that are on it, or are you talking citywide? There would be a citywide emphasis to
Yeah, I was thinking specifically about our board. Can we do an anonymous and voluntary survey to share that kind of information about who we are, I guess, so that we can see whether or not we really are representing the broad cross section of Ann Arbor that we should be. I mean, is that, to me, that's the intent of reserving a single spot for someone from a particular demographic, is to make sure that we have the correct representation across the various demographics. Is there a way to achieve that without setting aside just one single demographic?
Dharma?
I mean, if the question is there a way? I'm sure there is, because I think other commissions are doing this. So, I can't speak to why certain information was redacted from what Brett's seeing. I've certainly seen demographic information and applications from other commissions that have been circulated to me by the chair. So I don't really know what's going on. So I would imagine, like, yes, it's possible. Procedurally, I guess I just want to ask what the decision is before us tonight, because I think basically this is going to go back, this bylaw revision is going to go back to City Council. I think it was September 18th. And so I think, I don't know, I would just like to kind of focus on what decision are we actually able to make tonight? Is it just whether we add this 55 and up, or is it inserting information that's more about striving for diversity of membership? That would be my question.
So what's before us includes the stipulation that 1 seat would be over for somebody over the age of 55.
Okay.
And so I guess one point of clarification I wanted to get on that specific statement, that only applies to the seats for members, general members of the public. Would it, and why would it not apply to the commission as the voting members as a whole? The representatives from planning, disabilities. Right now, as it's written, it would only apply to the 7 seats that are for general members of the public. But is it not just as valuable if the member from the Commission on Disabilities meets that requirement? I don't know. Was there an intent that it's only for the general members of the public? Okay.
That was my impression.
All right.
I think there's more turnover for the representatives from special commissions. Maybe that might be one reason to prior, for it to be especially important for the people who serve in longer terms.
Okay. So we have what's before us. Do we want to amend it? If anyone wants to make a motion to amend what we have before us, now would be the time. Otherwise, we can vote on it. If we vote no, I'm not sure what happens. Raymond, is that just back to the drawing board on the bylaws? Or
Well, no, if you vote no, then your decision is to stick with your original proposal, which is the 7 members at large with no restriction on one of those members for age. And then that would be forwarded to city council as your recommendation for when they take up the matter, as Dharma mentioned, on September 18th. There are always, actually one of the things I have as possible future agenda items, we do an annual review of our bylaws. So, and that normally comes up around September, which is next month. So there's an opportunity for us to address something above and beyond with all these other discussions we just had. And then, to some of the suggestions I heard, like from Pete and others, if you all want to do a, self-assessment or like an anonymous survey, staff can tee that up. That doesn't necessarily need to be in the bylaws per se, but it sounds like there's still some interest in understanding what applicants might be representative of what demographics. So there might be something there, but yeah, it's kind of hard to kind of like, do this on the fly. I think, the immediate issue is the one that council has put before us, but some of these other issues we can also address through further deliberation in a future bylaws change.
Dharma?
And of course, whatever discussion we have, I'm happy to bring it to council about what we've discussed in terms of increasing diversity and this being part of an annual review that's kind of collided with each other. So I will also bring that up.
Okay, so yeah, my impression had been that if we voted no, there would be the vote. So that would imply that we want no changes to the bylaws, meaning we still have the seat for the owner of a, transportation business, but that's not correct. Voting no just goes back to our original proposed change to the bylaws, and that would go to council again. Okay.
Right, yeah, because the what we've already had 2 public hearings on is the change that you all had sponsored last year. So I think that's still the action on the floor, as it were, for council. Then there's been this postponement for additional consideration of this age requirement. And that sort of like amendment to the existing transportation commission action is the one that is still on the floor for council and that you're discussing tonight.
Okay. Any other comments then before we vote? Yes, Swanu?
I'm so sorry. I'm very confused. So we vote no adding age, but we are getting rid of like the one person who owns the transportation thing. If we vote yes, we're adding an age thing, right? Okay. I'm going to be voting no, just heads up. Thanks.
All right. Well, with that, is there a motion to a motion for the suggested change to the bylaws to change the membership to read 7 members of the public, one of whom shall be 55 years of age or older? Motion by Dharma, seconded by Wanmu. All those in favor of the motion, please say yes or raise your hand. All right, all those opposed to the motion, please say no or raise your hands.
No.
Okay, it looks like the motion fails then. So this will go back to council in the original form of the proposed of the change to our bylaws. And yeah, okay, we'll see what happens at the September 18th meeting, I guess, for council. Okay. right. All right, next up, information and discussion, the Transportation Asset Management Plan. The Transportation Asset Management Plan is going to be presented to City Council for approval on September 5th, 2023. So Nick will give an overview of the Transportation Asset Management Plan and answer any questions we have. So Nick, floor is yours.
Thank you. Let me get that going there. Okay, I think everybody should be able to see this, right?
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, Transportation Asset Management Plan, this sounds very grand, but I just want to kind of manage expectations here. This isn't quite as a grand of of an undertaking as it may sound from its title, but I'll get into that in just a second here. So what is this document exactly? Per the Public Act 325 in the state of Michigan, this act requires qualifying government agencies, of which we are one, to submit a transportation asset management plan every 3 years to the Transportation Asset Management Council. And this plan is primarily relates to pavement condition, but also improve it. Well, there's an overall compliance plan, and then there is a pavement asset management plan, a bridge asset management plan, and some sections on signals, culverts, gravel roads, and things like that, which are all kind of subsections of that overall plan. So the plan that we have that we put together here comes from or is using the template provided by the state and has all of the kind of check boxes of the information that they require for that. Now, that all of that said, this plan, while it's very important to have, to use asset management, to have a plan for how we manage our assets, this report in and of itself is really somewhat of an administrative box checking exercise that we're required to submit to the state. So while the plan is attached to this item and you have access to it if you would like to dig into it in future in more detail, it's really very dry and does not have is not chock full of really easily consumable information, we'll put it that way. So so my presentation here this evening, which will be pretty brief, I decided, I think, to hit the main points of this plan, which is really in the pavement asset management plan portion of it, so that we can kind of take a look at where our goals stand and where our where we are right now in terms of pavement condition. And the other thing I want to mention that you will not see in this plan anywhere, there is no mention, there's no discussion of any active transportation, bicycle, peds, anything like that. And that the reason behind that is this plan is really focused on condition of assets, condition of the pavement, bridges, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not talking about how that space is used, more the condition that it's in. So what is pavement asset management? Well, that's how we, that's the plan that one would use to improve our overall road conditions. Going back a little bit of a history lesson here, previous strategies that we were using in the city focused more on the resurfacing and reconstruction of roads, which you would call kind of the worst first methodology. And that's not the greatest way to go about managing your assets, because it ignores all of the roads that are in decent shape that could be maintained in decent shape, and uses much more expensive fixes to just address the ones that are worst. So about 10 years ago, we had a little bit of a paradigm shift to try to more use the right fix at the right time, where these roads that are in decent condition, to spend some more resources maintaining them in good condition and preventing them from falling down into those worst categories. And we expanded the mix of fixes to do that, using some more, doing more crack sealing, more cape seals. And that's what we would refer to as capital preventative maintenance. Again, that's hitting those streets that are already in decent shape and trying to keep them there. The city uses the PACER rating system, and the way we kind of categorize that is it's a 1 to 10 scale, 1 to 3 being poor condition, 4 to 5 being fair, and then 6 to 10 being considered good. The PACER system is used by MDOT and most other local agencies in Michigan. So the data we're submitting is consistent with everybody else, which certainly makes the state happy. And our last data collection was done in 2021. The current data collection is actually going on right now. So this fall we'll have the results of that data collection, and then we can reprocess and see where we stand on our payment conditions. So we break up that we have some sets of goals that were set a couple of years ago for a 2026 horizon, and this was these goals were set basically to be goals that we could reasonably achieve within existing funding levels, and that includes the road bond that was issued last year. And so we have several goals for that time, for that horizon, specifically for our major and our local streets. The screenshots that I've got here on this slide are from the dashboard that I mentioned. I think I did a presentation on a few months back. And this looks specifically at our major streets here. And on the left there, the little dial, we have a goal of 60% of our major streets being in the good category, and we're fairly close on that. And then looking at the one on the right, we have a goal of trying to have less than 20% of our streets being in the poor category, and we're at 22 right now. Overall average PACER rating for the whole major street system, we're targeting 5.66. We're at 5.66. We're targeting 5.8. So we're actually in pretty good shape with our majors. We're not that far off of our goals for that 26 horizon. And then looking at local streets, for 2026, we want at least 45% to be in the good condition. We're only at 35 right now. And then in looking at the roads that are in the poor condition, we would like to be under 39%. We're at about that right now. So going forward, we want to, try to on average keep more of slipping down to that category in the short term. And then for average PACER rating, we're currently at 4.74, and we're trying to get to 5.24. So we have a lot more work to do on the local end of things, which is why we're trying to get more of our assets invested in that area. So the rationale for these current goals, again, that's on the 2026 horizon. Though it sets looking at some average PACER scores, which is easy to quantify, but it also doesn't ignore completely those worst roads, because those are the ones we clearly get the most complaints about that are down in that poor category. We also did a little benchmarking versus other communities. The goals of other communities with similar road networks are kind of all over the place, to be quite frank. But what we have is not completely and ridiculously out of line with those other communities. And where we are now is not actually that far out of line with other communities. And these goals are aggressive, but they are achievable as well with our current funding scenarios. And so for next steps in terms of pavement condition, we're going to complete those PACER ratings for this year that are in progress right now. We're going to use that data to perform some additional modeling and make refinements and tweaks to our pavement maintenance strategy. And then the big one, I think, for coming up that we really want to focus on is, I think most can agree that the goals we have established for 2026 really don't reflect the desired condition of the overall system in the long term. So we really want to establish some of those longer term goals. What is the maybe state of equilibrium in our system that we want to shoot for in the long run? So there'll be a lot more discussions on that hopefully next year. And then some, just to outline really quickly, some challenges that we might expect to encounter in terms of trying to get to our goals. The last couple of years have seen very steep increases in construction costs. So that's always a challenge. Contractor capacity is the other issue. We struggle with getting all of our capital preventative maintenance work done because of the capacity of contractors to do that. And then we're constantly, under that pressure to resurface more of those poor streets that are in those worse condition. And if we focused all of our resources on that, we would never get ahead. So it's a really difficult place to be in, to tell people that, yeah, we know those streets are in very bad condition and we're going to get to them eventually, but it is going to take some time. All right, that is my presentation, and with that, I will open it up to questions, and I'll stop my sharing here so that we can see everybody.
All right, what questions do we have? Okay. I was going to ask, well, maybe other people think of questions. So the city has its own millage for road repair, right? And so in your efforts to benchmark other communities, have you found that it's common for them to have similar millages that are unique to their communities? And how does that compare or how does that manifest itself in the average PACER ratings? Do other communities get similar PACER ratings without a millage, or how does that look?
Well, that's a good question and a complex one. So I would say that historically, it has not been common for other communities to have millages. But it is becoming more and more common as other municipalities are under pressure to improve pavement condition in their areas. I don't know, when we kind of benchmark versus others, a handful of other communities, I don't know that we necessarily check to see if they had millages or not. Part of the variation that we see on a lot of these is the makeup of their road system. Our road system is predominantly asphalt. And there's a lot of other communities, some of the Detroit suburbs, for example, where most of their residential streets are built out of concrete. And that's somewhat of a historical remnant, I think. They must have had requirements that when those subdivisions were built, that the roads were built in concrete. I wish we had that. Unfortunately, we don't. And replacing an asphalt street with concrete is very expensive. So we're somewhat stuck in the system that we have right now. And that in looking at that data that we got from that explains some of the variations in the numbers that we see among the different communities. I don't know if that entirely answers your question, but that's what I got right now anyway.
Especially the part about concrete roads. I know that like South Industrial is concrete, but in the section of South State, but I can't think of many other roads.
Maple's another major one, but yeah, we don't have a lot.
And as far as the long-term goal setting past 2026, what are the plans to develop those goals? Are there any plans yet?
Not really yet. It's probably going to involve. The way I'm seeing it right now is it's going to involve kind of kind of what are our values type thing. What do we want to strive for? And then there's going to have to be some iterative process about ideally we'd like all of our roads to be perfect, but that's not realistic. So there'll be some, I think some, maybe, with this level of funding, we can achieve this. And with this level of funding, we can achieve this. So we might need to I think we might start by laying out something like that and then trying to get to some sort of consensus of what a reasonable expectation for our pavement condition is going to be. And I'm sure we will be engaging the Transportation Commission and City Council in that discussion.
That's what I was looking for. Okay. What other questions or comments do people have? All right, not seeing any. So thank you very much, Nick. I like seeing this every year. Appreciate you coming out and presenting this to us.
You're welcome.
All right, and then finally, communications section of the agenda, staff report and updates. You should have received a staff report providing project updates with your agenda materials. It also includes the June crash report from the police department. So Raymond, if you could review highlights of these documents. Raymond.
Yes, got it. Thank you. Yes, so the annual street resurfacing project work began in July and will last through fall, possibly into 2024. The project on Huron Parkway has been completed, and there is some public engagement work underway for Bedford Road from Washtenaw to Londonderry. More information about that can be found at a newly created website, which is a2gov.org/Bedford. State Street improvements phase 2 has been completed up to Washington, which leaves one last remaining block between Washington and Huron, which is currently underway, which is anticipated to be complete by Labor Day. Platte Road from Huron to Packard is substantially complete, and the road is currently open to traffic.
Hey, Raymond, I believe that State Street is now actually open to traffic too. One of those things that happens between when we actually do the updates and when we get to the commission meeting.
There you go. This time of year is always exciting because a lot of stuff wraps up, and it's always a mad rush to get things done before school starts, and another mad rush to get things done before the end of the, before the snow starts falling. So it's always fun to see how fluid these status.
Just that section of state, right? Not the Hill and State project on the ground. Right?
Correct.
Okay.
That's a separate entry.
Yeah. Okay. Broadway Street from Plymouth to Plymouth is expected to be complete soon, late August or early September. Geddes Avenue resurfacing from Observatory to Highland is substantially complete, and the road is now open to traffic. Earhart from 23 to Geddes, construction is now underway and is anticipated to last through the fall. Here's the other State and Hill project that Brett just mentioned. Construction has been completed on the stretch of State Street from Southview to Hill. There was a pause due to art fair, but work is now continuing between Southview and Hill, and also between Dewey and Granger. And the last section of Hill Street is expected to be postponed until spring of 2024.
Raymond, I forgot to include this in the update, but the current schedule for this portion of State Street has it being completed and open to traffic by September 1st. So we're hoping that we can hold to that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Main Street, construction from William to Main. That probably isn't Main. William to Washington, is that right, Nick? Has been completed.
Yeah, that's an error. Yeah, it's
William to Washington. Yeah, there you go.
William to Washington. Yeah.
Yeah. So right now, the intersection of Main and Huron is undergoing some construction, which is expected to be complete by the end of August. If you've been out there, this also has resulted in some lane reductions at even on Huron in order to do those, I think, tie-ins and such. Huron Parkway, Glacier Way, preventive maintenance, construction is now complete. 7th Street in Greenview, there really isn't a lot of new updates since we went last time, but I think one of the things that we've mentioned is these projects are now combined as a single project. So a lot of the language is the same, it's just condensed into a single project. Construction is scheduled for 2024. Miller Avenue, the impetus initially for this project was a new water main between Chapin and Newport, but we are looking to extend the Miller-Catherine cycle track or all ages and abilities bike facility further to the west, possibly as far west as Maple. So we're currently working with a consultant on a scope to do that work, and then we hope to do some engagement in that this fall. But it is a 2024 project, so there's a lot of work to be done in order for us to get to a design that works by then. Downtown area circulation study has now kicked off. I think we included some language last month, but there's some updated language with the help of our friends at the DDA. And it now states that the plans propose changes to active transportation, transit priority streets, one-way to two-way street conversions, and event streets. Study will consider how to balance the needs of multimodal travel, business activity, and infrastructure demands in the same street corridor, as well as a network-wide transportation impact. The study kicked off in July and will be in a discovery phase until December. There's an internal working group known as the Downtown Street Design Team that will function as the technical advisory committee. And stakeholder engagements and updates to the Transportation Commission are expected for later this year, possibly in November or December. The trunk line transfer, we just recently received kind of an updated benefit cost analysis tool that uses the United States Department of Transportation guidance on defining benefits. So some interesting things are coming out of that. We do expect that to be wrapped up in the coming months. Just as a reminder, this is kind of a technical paper, so there isn't like engagement on it or anything like that, but we will be sure to share that study with you all when it's finalized. MDOT coordination, just wanted to give you an update on the Jackson Huron crosswalks. So we did meet with MDOT in the field earlier this month to review the latest set of plans and did a walkthrough of the corridor to identify if there are any kind of last minute issues that came up. As a reminder, we're looking at 4 new crosswalks on the Jackson Huron corridor, near Vets Park, near Warden, near Virginia Ave, and near Crest Urbana. And so we're hoping to finish up the design by the end of this month. Now that we've had that final field visit with MDOT, which then we submit those plans over to MDOT for review and approval. And then once they're approved, the project's put out to bid for construction. DT streetlights, there are 332 that have been fixed so far in 2023, but we're investigating into whether that number is accurate. So that number may change significantly next month if we find something out from DT. So stay tuned in that space. Traffic calming, we talked a lot about that tonight, so I probably can skip over those updates included in the report because I think we talked about most of them today. And then just plan update implementation, several different things. The speed management program, which I mentioned a little bit earlier. We just finished up the focus groups. So there's some opportunity to go back and kind of review those comments and see if there are additional changes or how we can maybe position that program for success through engagement. So stay tuned in that. We do plan to bring that back to this commission, as a refresher in terms of what we've discussed in the past and any changes and what our strategy is moving forward. Mapping updates. This is another kind of important one. The plan that the Moving Together Towards Vision Zero plan was adopted in 2021, but a lot of the data that went into that dates back to 2018 or 2019, just because it took a couple of years to develop the plan, and we couldn't refresh the data all the time. So the idea is we want to go back and analyze and update, for example, the tier 1 and tier 2 safety corridors to see if some of those crash patterns have changed and if other corridors now come into focus or not. So we're going to start that process this winter, and it'll probably take several months. So I suspect by sometime next year, we'll come to you with those updated maps. Quick build, one of our public commenters tonight spoke to that. So a lot of the vertical elements for quick build round 1 are now installed. I think most of them are. There were a couple minor modifications that had to be made, but yeah, it did take a lot longer than we had hoped. I'll be the first to admit that. One of the things that we're trying to do now is do some intercept surveys. So for example, we have some yard signs that we want to put out that will have a QR code that will allow people walking by, as opposed to people driving by, the opportunity to, take a quick survey so that we can understand people's perceptions of these quick builds. And we are continuing to work with a design consultant on quick build for the 2023 projects, which the design hopefully will be finished in early fall. This is, again, to add vertical delineators to the buffered bike lanes to make them protected bike lanes. So that work is ongoing. We are now ready to kind of launch the bike corral pilot program. So if you are aware of businesses or areas that might be interested in public bicycle parking, we now have a free permit online that people can apply to, which we're using as kind of the request form. We've placed the order for the racks, so I think they should be delivered any day now. So we're ready to launch those. We do have one business, Monty's Public House on East Packard, I think, that has expressed interest. So they might be the first one to get this treatment. But if you know of other areas that would be interested, please send them to either myself or Suzanne Flowers, or even Trevor Bryden within the transportation team, and we can walk them through the process.
Darren, do you have something to add about that?
Can I ask a follow-up question, or should I save it till the end?
Oh, okay, all right.
I just wondered, does the bike corral pilot program, would the request be initiated by the business, or could it be initiated by a frequenter of the business? Like, does it matter?
I don't think it matters. What we would probably do, if it's not initiated by the business, we would want to make sure that we consult with the business, because depending upon where the placement of the rack is, we want to make sure that, you know, they're good with what we're proposing. So yeah, I don't think it has to necessarily be initiated by. I think we initially anticipated it was going to be from the business, but okay. I think that's a hard requirement.
Cool, thanks.
Yep. Safe Streets for All. We continue our back and forth with Federal Highway Administration to work on the final contract. We're still trying to work through the list of projects and kind of tease out, you know, how much goes towards design, how much goes towards environmental, how much goes towards construction. But it's been a lot of back and forth, and that back and forth continues. So it's taking longer than we had anticipated. I think it's taking longer than Federal Highway had anticipated, but it is what it is. It's a new program, so I think they're trying to figure out a lot of things as we go through. Whenever we come across a new question, it's something that needs to be solved for. So stay tuned in that space as well. And bike parking inventory is somewhat a function of this bike corral program. We are trying to really understand and get a more holistic picture of all the bicycle parking that's available. So the DDA has pretty good records of the public spaces downtown. But once you get outside of downtown, there really aren't a lot of public spaces. There are a lot of private spaces or spaces on private property. So we still want as holistic a picture as possible for all of those. So we had an intern working on it, and we're going to try to fill in a lot of those gaps as much as possible. But I suspect what we'll do is we'll share some of that information publicly. And if there are gaps, people can help us fill in those gaps as well. World Car Free Day is coming up soon, next month. So there are some partnerships ongoing right now between the Office of Sustainability and Innovation, the Get Downtown program, and others to kind of encourage a sort of commuter challenge for that day. It may not be a commuter challenge in its current form, but the idea is to, you know, what can we do to encourage people to not use a vehicle that day, and what are the partners that we can do? I believe this also coincides with the Mayor's Green Fair, so it's a very good, complementary event. So again, spread the word on that initiative. We'll meet before then, a couple days before then, so we'll have an opportunity to talk about any other programs or incentives that may have been launched. Our Lunch and Learn series continues. Upcoming trainings will be on August 23rd next week, October 25th, and December 13th. Again, this is to try to institutionalize some of the aspects of the Vision Zero plan across multiple departments of the city. And then members of our team are on the Association of Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals. So there's an event on September 18th with a guided bike ride through parts of Detroit. And the city of Detroit is also hosting the national conference next year, August 12th through the 14th of 2024. Several members of our team are going, but I'm sure other folks can go as well if they're interested. And then the June crash report is included in the backup. I can just quickly show that. So let's see. There were, let's see, 7 pedestrian crashes in June involving pedestrians, 2 of which were serious injury crashes. And there was a bicycle crash in June that resulted in serious injury as well. And then as indicated in the monthly report, there was also a fatality whereby a motorcyclist died from injuries on Jackson near the Wyndham Garden Hotel entry drive, and that occurred on July 31st at approximately 2:45 p.m. in the afternoon. So with that somber note, that concludes my updates, and I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Pete?
I noticed that Scioto Church has dropped off of the report of active projects. I'm just wondering when the sidewalk on the north side is scheduled to be done. That's one part that is not finished yet there at Greenview Park. Or no, I'm sorry, it's Greenview Nature Area.
Yeah, I think it's on the full update list, but we are still working out the easements with the public schools. We anticipate that'll be done this fall.
Like the work will be performed, or the easements will be straightened out?
The work. Yeah.
Okay, great. Can I, since you brought up the public schools, can I also add the cyclist crash at the corner of 7th and Stadium, if I'm reading the police report correctly, involved a Ann Arbor Public Schools bus that did a right hook and took out a cyclist. So this is yet another topic that I would like to cover with our AAPS representative on this commission. And I'd just like to register my disappointment once again that we do not have their participation.
All right, thank you, Dharma.
Raymond, as you were talking, I was trying to find the permit request for the bike corral pilot program. And can you tell me where it is? Because I can't find it. Or can you send it later?
Yeah, I probably can do it on it's actually in Intergov or Stream. So
I looked on Stream. I couldn't see it. Okay.
Okay.
I'll look again.
I'll have to maybe double check that I was pretty certain it was launched, but I'll check with the team that worked on that and get you all a direct link. I can send that to everybody.
Thank you. All right, now liaison reports. Any commissioners who specifically serve as a liaison to another body or organization, if you have any brief reports or updates to provide at this time? Wanwu?
Yeah, sure. I'll make this pretty quick. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, psych, I cannot share my screen. Just wanted to let everybody know kind of that we're kicking off the comprehensive plan schedule. There will be a steering committee we're going to be going out with it. So August, let's see, can I share yet? Oh, cool, great. Can you guys see this okay?
Yep.
Oh, cool. So just wanted to give you guys a heads up on the comprehensive plan, because it is integrating and kind of consolidating all of our major elements of the different land use plan, natural features plan, as well as Vision Zero and our transportation plan. Just wanted to give you guys just a overview of the schedule, just to make sure you guys kind of know and be able to participate. You guys are all obviously all big stakeholders. So I think the steering committee, we're just talking about, getting that kicked off. That's just kind of a sounding board. So wanted to just, again, share this with you guys overall. The only other thing from planning that's coming up in the next week or so, it's a minor modification of the TC1, just has to do with the row. We're talking about potentially pushing back the setback but just a little bit due to the fact that if it's on a transit line, so think stadium, it's a 35 miles an hour or 40 miles an hour. Cars turning out of that particular mixed use development may not have the line of sight if the building is too close. And also as far as like trees and insulation. So they're looking at landscape tree items as well as transit corridor setbacks to try and minimize. Just pulling out of like stadium is very difficult. So if you pull the building all the way up to a transit corridor, it can be very difficult to see pedestrians or even having good visibility. So those are the two kind of things that I just wanted to bring to your guys' attention as far as Transportation Commission, and that is about it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I can give the update for the ride. So the ride is making minor service adjustments starting Sunday, August 27th. The service updates are being made to improve service reliability and accessibility. The routes with service updates are 4, 24, 34, 62, and 66. In addition, some boarding locations at the Blake Transit Center will be altered, though departure times will not change.
All right, any other liaison reports? All right, call for agenda items. Are there any other than what Pete already mentioned at the beginning of the meeting about the speed management program? Any other call for agenda topics? You're always very welcome to please email those to Raymond, myself, Megan, anyone. Always looking for agenda topics. All right, the next meeting will be held on Wednesday, September 20th, 2023 at 7 p.m. It also will be a virtual meeting. So if there are no objections, we'll adjourn our August 16th, 2023 meeting. Is that an objection, Pete? Oh, okay, all right. Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.